Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dads with Mics. I'm very excited about today's episode because it's a very special episode today. We have Dr. Shannon Smith here with us. Now, before anybody says anything in the comments, I know she's not a dad, okay? But there's a very good reason for her being here today, which I'll get to in a couple of minutes. But first of all, let me introduce to everybody Dr. Shannon Smith MD. She's a dedicated physician specializing in children's mental and physical well-being. She founded Own Your Focus, which is a platform that helps families thrive by improving communication, connection, and problem-solving skills. So, Dr. Smith, how are you today? Welcome to Dads with Mics.
Rem, I'm so excited to be here, and feel free to call me Shannon. I'm great with that.
Okay. Dr. Smith sounds cooler though, but yeah, sure, I'll call you Shannon.
But I'd say most of my patient stuff will call me Dr. Shannon. Like that tends to be that. But I'm just excited to be here, Rem. I've got to listen to your podcast and we've got to interact on X. And just thank you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and sharing this platform with others.
My pleasure, and thank you for the kind words. Just to give everybody a little bit of a context as to why you're here with us today. Uh, I'm a big proponent and advocate of our children and their well-being, whether it's physical or mental well-being, and how we talk to our kids. And the reason I invited you on the podcast today was because, well, you were engaging with some of my content on X, which I appreciate very much, by the way. And I noticed your profile that you're a pediatrician and you also specialize in helping families. So that got my attention. And I thought to myself, well, wouldn't it be great to have an expert opinion on the stuff that I talk about almost on a daily basis online, which is how we should talk to our children uh, in order for them to be raised in a peaceful and calm environment at home. So that's the reason for the invitation, your presence here today. So thank you again. Shannon, let me know a little bit about yourself and so everybody can get to know you a little bit, your background, your family, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. So, yeah, thank you for sharing about my platform. My platform is where I am today. So I'll dive back a little bit. I spent the past 20 years as a pediatrician in a wonderful small community in West Virginia. It's on the West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky border. And during that time, Rem, I saw what probably most people recognize now in the statistics of children becoming less healthy, more anxious, more depressed, and I felt really frustrated. In many ways, I felt like I was putting band-aids on gushing wounds. And I myself, when I really started to notice this, had a little girl. She was about 2, and I was going through a divorce. And that kind of was the beginning of knowing this isn't just those people, everybody else out there. This is affecting all of our children. And so it became my mission to say, what are these root causes? Because I don't feel like we're getting to them. And then are there solutions, or how can we find them together and start implementing them? And one of my values, I would say, is efficiency. I do not like to waste my time or others' time. And so getting to things and changing them as effectively and efficiently as I can is so important to me. And just seeing these families struggle. We are also in an area that was there was a documentary made called Heroin with an E. We were part of the Purdue Pharma. Our community got crushed with opioids, and just seeing what happened when I started PEDS, almost very few families were being raised by their grandparents. I currently work with an organization, Healthy Grandfamilies, which is a statewide organization that helps grandparents raising their grandkids. And if you're ready for a crazy statistic, in the state of West Virginia, 3 out of 4 children are not being primarily raised by their parents. 3
Oh,
out of
wow.
4. Yes. So that is kind of what I got to see unfold during my career. And then me personally trying to figure out, find these answers, and then I knew nothing about business, nothing. And I used to joke, my whole family, my dad's has a bulldozer company. And I used to think like, I'm not smart enough to go into business, so I'm going to become a doctor. And so I had to figure out how can you monetize that thing you want to change in the world. Because, some people will be like, oh, if you're doing something kind, you shouldn't figure out how to monetize it. I'm like, then why would we do things?
Yeah.
Like, how could I leave and put my focus on that? So fortunately, I found an incredible partner. He started one of the larger children's foster care and mental health facilities. And when we met, I told him what I wanted to create. And on the third date, he said, I can help you build that. And he has just been a rock. We just had our 10-year anniversary and we blended our families, and he helped me build Own Your Focus. Without him, I would not be here. And fortunately, I've been able to work with families holistically to really come in and change from the food to that stress level. And you've highlighted it on your podcast many times, just the stress of us just
Yeah.
radiates to our children, and you can see it. So working with the kids really did feel like band-aids. So that's a little bit about my background.
Okay, great. I want to get back right away because it shocked me when you mentioned it, the 3 out of 4 children not being raised by their parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
How does that come about?
Okay.
Why
So
is that a thing?
the heroin epidemic is a big piece of it. That starting with the opioids, Purdue Pharma. Yeah, I don't know if you know much about the Purdue Pharma story with OxyContin,
Not really.
but okay, so there's some great documentaries on it, but basically Purdue Pharma brought OxyContin specifically to our area with coal miners with back injuries.
All right.
And when I was in residency, I can very clearly remember the reps showing up. And do you know that pain scale? It's like, what is your pain? 0
Yeah.
to 10 with a smiley face. That was actually created by them.
Oh,
They
okay.
really came up with pain as a disease, and not saying it's not a problem, but they very much studying the economics. Becoming an entrepreneur has been critical to my understanding of how healthcare works and how products are going to be maximized for profit. And so turns out Purdue, and they've since been sued for this and turned in false data to the FDA, and the FDA approved their drug. And so basically they just got a generation of people hooked on what they believed was a safe drug. And when I say 75% are raised by their grandparents, it's not all their grandparents. We think it's about 50% grandparents. The other 25 might be aunts, older siblings, things like that. But
Okay.
basically, we just saw a large wipeout of of families. But I believe that's almost secondary. I really think there's something foundational that the reason people end up numbing. Of course, there's some for pain, but really there's something, whether it's alcohol, whether it's suicide, whatever those things are, there's something below that. So,
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting and depressing at the same time, but
mhm.
it's and it leads to my next question actually, and it's something that's always on my mind. In your opinion and your experience, do you think children these days are less, just as, or more stressed and anxious than in the past in our
Hmm.
modern era?
Okay. So that it's a good question. It's just so broad because I love studying humanity from like thousands of years. And, you know, it'd be hard to look at like a war-torn World War I and say, how were those kids compared to our kids?
Right.
Um, I think our kids are very stressed, very stressed. But I also, going back and like, I'll just use my dad, for example. My dad did not meet his father until he was 4 because he was gone in World War I. And when he showed back up, he had one leg, and every time it lightninged, he would crawl under the bed and cry. Like, I can't even fathom. And where I was saying there's something foundational, that's trauma, the medical term for trauma, meaning it's not what happened to you, it's what happened inside of you when you felt unsafe or you didn't belong. And so I do believe we are meant, when you go back and study tribes. So one of my favorite books, as a pediatrician, you had to read two books, or I'd be like, you can't be my patient. These two books are foundational. And one of those is called Hunt, Gather, Parent. Excellent book. This NPR reporter goes and studies children living in tribe-like areas throughout the world, and to see these children play and be connected with their families, it's just a different version. We don't see that depression, we don't see that anxiety, because there's this home. And so whether it's this generation or the last generation, I feel like we've all been so impacted, and the stress and the anxiety are just manifesting differently.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And going back to your experience with children, what would you say was the most common issue that you came across your desk in terms
Mm-hmm.
of children feeling stress or anxiety? Because
Oh,
now we hear about it a lot, and you know what? I feel like it's on. And my initial question was because I feel like it's been on an upwards trend in terms
mm-hmm.
of stress with kids, because it seems like we're hearing about it a lot more than we used to. And again, that's just a perception, but that's just how it feels. You hear about kids, young children, from ages 5 to 13, needing psychological help, therapy, medication. And it seems too common for my taste.
Yeah.
But in your experience, what did you come across that was so prevalent in your time?
So I'm gonna show my naiveness. When I started as a pediatrician, I truly was like, I can't wait to see happy, thriving kids. And Rem, it was like I was punched in the face. I hear everybody talking about COVID made it so much worse, and I'm not saying it didn't exacerbate many areas, but that's not what I saw. Pretty much from the time I started pediatrics, it was children self-loathing, depressed, anxious. One time I heard, from birth to 7 is when you're really forming that personality. And so when parents are yelling and stressed out at them, and this really makes sense to me, kids don't have the understanding to look and go, oh, well, my mom's just stressed. The world is scary out there. It's much safer for them to be like, I'm bad. I'm bad. So that's what I saw. I saw kids self-loathing even early. Like, I remember the first kid I saw that was harming animals, and I'm talking young, like second grade. And my mind was blown. Like, I couldn't even imagine it. And to see, part of our training was we went and worked with Child Protective Services. I'm not sure what the name is in Canada. Is that a similar service,
I
CPS?
don't know the name either, but yeah, we have something similar for sure.
Well, getting to work with them was so eye-opening to see how incredibly overwhelmed that these services were. And again, back to the Band-Aids. And I couldn't understand why at that time. And no doubt it's in the news way more. And I think most statistics will tell you it's way worse. And a lot of people that are talking about cell phones and things like this. And I agree, it's the disconnection. It all comes back to the opposite of medical trauma is connection. And you feel connected when you're running outside without shoes on in a creek with your buddies. You feel connected when your family it feels like a safe place. And from what I've seen since being in practice, it's been bad for a while since
Wow.
I've been in.
And surely that comes with some physical symptoms as well, right? I mean,
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I mean, whether it's the belly pain, whether it's the not talking, whether it's the just anger, the parents like, what's going on here, whether it's even chronic illness. And it's hard to tease those out, those kids that are constantly coming in for an ear infection. Um, it's such a holistic view needed from the crap our kids are eating today. Well, most of us
yeah,
are eating
yeah.
today. To just anything like in Michigan when they got all the fluoride in the water, and it's even like it's hard to know what to trust when we're referring to our kids. And my favorite thing I see is when I do see these families more homesteading and growing their own food together and eating simplistic, like we have our own chickens, we have our own eggs, and like it just makes me giddy to know that my kids get to see a bit of that circle versus I work in the school systems now as Own Your Focus. We collaborate with numerous organizations, and
Okay.
one of those organizations is a wonderful STEM high school where we come in and we do everything from bring in yoga to bring in breath work to bring them hard-boiled eggs from our chickens, but trying to get that holistic approach to try to start helping these kids be more connected to themselves and the environment.
That's awesome. And you mentioned earlier about the different symptoms that kids can get. And I wonder, I did a little bit of research in anticipation of our episode today. Nothing too crazy, but I did want to like pull up some statistics that were pretty troublesome to me just reading them. And I came across an article from the APA, the American Psychological Association, and it says children age 8 to 17 say they worry about doing well in school, getting into good colleges, and their family's finances. They also report suffering headaches, sleeplessness, and upset stomachs. And then it goes on, but these stresses and symptoms are going largely unnoticed by parents. Now, this last part to me is baffling. I don't understand how children can experience these symptoms and their parents not noticing. Now, am I missing something here? Is that something that you've seen in your experience?
So, how I would tend to describe that is the parents may notice they are so overwhelmed and they don't know where to go because the most part, one, worrying about school, which I saw constantly. Okay. Kids want to do well. Kids want to please their parents. And
Yeah.
we're missing that so much. Um, and then also we're telling them to be perfect instead of this key that's built in for resilience, which is failing forward, making mistakes, embracing, and we do the opposite of that in our schools. And so I think we put this pressure on parents to, hey, go get that kid help. And for me, I know I felt like it was hard to find help. I am still trying to build my life and others' lives to get them what they need. I have therapists, coaches, things that I'm constantly referring people in order to build that out, getting them holistic food. So whether the parents notice or not, I can't say whether they feel so overwhelmed, they're not sure where to go, versus if the kids that are worried about school, I see a lot of parents and probably myself a little too, to be like, okay, good, they're worried. We praised perfectionism for so long in our society, and no, that perfectionism is a shield of trying not to show our authentic selves. And
Right.
that's why this starts so early. And it really is a lot of society. And so to me, many of the parents are caught in the tide that's going on.
Shannon, I remember in my youth experiencing migraines when I was
Mm,
really young. And I'm talking elementary school young, anywhere from 6 to 12 years old. And I remember feeling, now, of course, this is a long time ago, but as a child in elementary school, I remember feeling stressed with going to school.
mhm.
Now, that said, I was never the most studious person, especially as a child. Uh, it didn't come naturally to me to want to go to school. A lot of children like to go to school. I wasn't one of those kids. Summer vacation was the best time for me. And then going back to school, the anticipation leading up to end of August or early September, whatever it was, for the return to school made me really nervous.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I don't remember my parents taking me to a doctor or anything like that. Maybe they did. I just don't recall. But could that have been a direct cause of me being nervous about school or other, there might be other factors in play here, but to me, a child being that young and experiencing migraines, I remember having them on a weekly basis. And
Did you have
uh,
them in the summer?
that's a good question. It's something I've been dealing with for a very long time. It's a lot better now. I still get them now, but not as often as I used to as a kid. I remember, distinctly, it used to be like a weekly thing almost. And I used to have them more even in the beginning of the week because we had the weekend obviously, and then Sunday night I remember not being happy and being nervous because tomorrow morning, Monday morning, at school, obviously. And then I remember having these headaches almost always on a Monday because of the beginning of the week, I guess.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Is there a correlation there?
That you can easily see where, a very high likelihood. And when you look at schools, around my frustration with schools, like I would say the majority of kids don't like school, the
The
majority. And
majority.
what's crazy is I love learning now. I didn't like school. I was painfully, I mean, we are taking children, shoving them in a room with other children and trying to force feed them food for thought, when in
Right.
reality, we are supercomputers. And our love for learning, we want to learn, we want to drink it in. And our schools, in so many ways, in my opinion, and through numerous studies, are set up completely wrong instead of tapping into this incredible inner genius. And I'll tell you, we have two daughters and a son. My son would sit around, work on a 3D printer for days if you let him, work on a tractor. But him sitting in a school, in a classroom, is horrible. And Nassim Taleb, he's a philosopher alive today. I'm not sure if you know him. He had a great quote, and it was like, if giving children ADHD med to get them to fit into the school system is the same as putting them in too small of a bed and cutting their feet off. And of course, I'm sure I misquoted that slightly, but this is what I see. Here we are, these incredibly beautiful, intelligent learners, and we're made to see, oh, that's a studious kid. That's not. That's a smart kid. That's a dumb kid. Instead of like, oh, snap, we are all smart. It's how we're smart. And the school system isn't meant to tap into that genius. And so your experience is probably more common than you may realize.
Really. That's to me that's crazy. And the fact that it's a result of something that's supposed to be a positive thing, the
Yeah,
schools, but it just doesn't seem that way anymore.
no.
And now, would you say is that like a public school thing, or is just schools in general? Are you an advocate for homeschooling? What's your stance on that?
So let me jump back to school in general.
Okay.
That is something I've seen get worse. I think there for a long time we had smaller schools, more close knit, like where there used to be some schools where you had the same teacher for numerous years, and like really parents were involved in the school. And especially after COVID, I've seen a massive drop off. I have kids tell me there isn't a week that goes by that all their teachers show up. And that is not a slam on teachers. I think we are asking way too much of teachers. I think that kids need more individualized, more personal learning. Kids want to thrive. And I think teachers are tapped out. Anyone that wants to be a teacher, I salute you. And I think we need to be supporting them,
And good luck.
feeding them healthy. And so I don't know what your original question was, but I've seen schools significantly become more strained.
Now, is homeschooling a solution to that?
I definitely think it's one. I think if it's done correctly, I think it's a beautiful thing. I would have ideally loved to homeschool my children. I did not. I don't have that skill set. I don't have that patience. But if I had found, and maybe I could have found, and that just wasn't my priority, that would have been my dream. And in the summers, I was able to find different summers, really fabulous people that came in and did silly things, from playing out with the kids and walking them through, that the kids really enjoyed. But I just, in my dream world, kids would get to work on one-on-one. They would get to tap into their curiosity, and they would it wouldn't be about tests. It would be about collaboration, which and ultimately is the real world. I believe that is the key to solving future problems. It's learning to communicate, collaborate, and solve problems more effectively together. And that's not what we're tending to focus on in schools.
Right. And that leads me to think that is there maybe a problem with the way the way schools are structured and how we teach the curriculum to children, is it maybe not in their best interest the way it is they do it now? Is there maybe a reform that should be done? Why are we not looking at this? And we see it. We have the statistics, and the data shows that our children are not okay. The
Yeah.
kids are not okay. So why are we not looking at schools and maybe not, without pointing the finger, maybe let's, school is a big part of a children's life. So
Yeah.
let's sit down and have a look at this. Maybe is there something that we could be doing better?
So no doubt we can be doing this better. And there are plenty of people looking at it. I think in my mind, it's so easy to first get angry and then you dive in and you're like, wow, what a huge, huge problem. So I've had the opportunity to get to work with different school organizations and I'll use this story because it kind of helped me to see it a little bit more effectively. My husband told you he started a company, and when he stepped away from the company, I believe there was about 500 employees, and he told me, Shannon, in the beginning, when there was a few of us and there were 10 of us, we could move and we could iterate. And he said, by the end, it felt like you were steering the Titanic. And then he's like, now imagine what the school system is like. Imagine what our government's like. And you're like, oh my gosh. So when I go to these things, I feel like here we are teaching our children, I don't like adverbs, okay? And maybe I'm talking trash on adverbs, but we're not teaching them about probabilities, like things they make every day. We're not teaching them why their brain sees a sign that says for sale and looking at it. Like Robert Cialdini, he wrote great books on psychology and truly applicable ones. So you understand why you fall for scams or why you're more likely to make choices to understand your brain. Or we take a psychology class and we study these people that are hard to get in our brain versus how to be happy. Like if we taught life coaching in schools where these kids could apply it to their own lives. And so there are really great people out there trying. It is just oh my gosh, it just feels like this massive system that's hard. That's why I think homeschooling, or what we're doing at this STEM school, which only has 80 kids in the whole high school, it's trying to get these schools back to small where you can iterate and make changes.
I also have to think that in schools, there's a lot of focus on mathematics and language and history and science. That's justifiable for sure. But I feel like we're not spending enough time teaching kids life skills, soft skills, interpersonal skills. Now, I'm not saying that that doesn't fall on the parents as well. I mean, most of it starts at home for sure.
Mhm.
But would it hurt? And actually, I think it would be the contrary. It would probably help complement and in addition to the parents teaching this stuff at home, to have the schools in line with that and maybe have, I don't know, a once a week type of thing where we go over these things and help children deal with stress and dealing with school and exams and all that stuff. Do you think, in your opinion, is that something that would be a good idea? Should we leave it up entirely up to the parents, or should we also have schools assist in that regard?
Yeah. I think we need to pull it in more like small little communities because like I said, parents are so overwhelmed. Like it almost feels like this domino effect. It's like of people pointing, it's your job, it's your job, it's your job. And we're like, in the meantime, it's like we are drowning. So like canning. I'm just like, what if we can food? Like at that STEM high school we work at, they did put a greenhouse in, they did start showing like how to grow. I mean, that is a true skill. You walk away. And what I have found for kids that are depressed, you don't feel you have value. So when you can add value, you feel valuable. And so it really is this whole collaboration and connection type of element where we want to support the parents in order to show up and be there. And that includes changing language. You had the peaceful parent on. I felt like he totally nailed it. It's the opposite of what I did early on, and we can dive into that, but that's not what I grew up with. And so I associated success with how tough can you be versus how clear, how self-controlled can you be and really build that resilience. And I know for me, it's taken a long time for me to change that. And so we want to help these families. We want to give them these tools instead of pointing and saying, why aren't you learning these? And
Right.
in schools, really helping start back at the basics, especially as the dollar continues to be debased and inflated. It's more important than ever that we are able to take care of ourselves individually and as a community.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely agree with that. And you touched on it a little bit. Now let's shift the focus on the parents now without pointing the
Okay.
finger necessarily, because I'm a parent myself, so I'm ready to take part of the blame, but I think somewhere along the line, maybe, as parents, we need to look at what we're doing and how we're talking to our children, and are we a main factor in their stress and anxiety? And probably I think that it is, unfortunately, that some parents might not be doing the best for their children. Now, I know that you often speak about communication in
Mm-hmm.
families. How big of a factor is it that parents, in the way they speak to their kids on a daily basis, how much does that affect the children and the way they're able to thrive in their environment?
It's huge. The parent's voice becomes the child's inner voice.
Okay. So it's definitely the tone of voice, the words that we use then would be very important, and how, I guess, how we would deal with a tantrum. You mentioned I had Luke, he's the peaceful parenting coach that you were referring to. We dove into that a lot, how to deal with a tantrum, how to get our children to be able to deal and to self-regulate their emotions. That's a huge thing. So, in your opinion, what's the best way for parents to deal with a tantrum, let's say, that their child is having in a grocery store? They're pointing at a chocolate bar that they want, and the parents saying, "No, we're not going to have that today." And inevitably, the child throws himself on the ground and starts yelling or crying, or whatever it may be. What's the best way to address that situation?
Okay, so I'm gonna start with what's the wrong way to address it.
Let's do it.
And you use the word blame. One of the key factors I found was shame and blame. Shame and blame to ourselves and others is absolutely triggers the opposite reaction of what we want. We know where our brains light up when we feel shame or blame, and it lights up in a part of the brain called the amygdala, which essentially triggers those whatever was done to you as a kid, whatever that fear-based thing. So I remember early on when my daughter would do that and immediately embarrassed if everyone's looking at me, oh my gosh, I'm the worst. Oh, she's a pediatrician, look at her kid. Like everything goes through your head and you just want to die. And so the wrong thing is to, and of course we're not sure the age we're discussing here, but like let's just say two.
Sure.
The wrong thing is to be like, what are you thinking, get up here, it's not even, the child doesn't even have that rational thought process at that point. And I'm so glad that did happen to me. And I was so glad I didn't have those skills. I mean, I didn't, so I'm going to accept that I didn't at that age. That was not part of our pediatric training. It wasn't until, I was trying to be like, what am I doing wrong? What's going on? That I found a book called, and this is the second one that I told everyone, like I would cut out pages from it and just hang it on my wall. It's How to Talk So Your Kids Will Listen and How to Listen So Your Kids Will Talk. It is so good. I've read it 7 times. It has cartoons all over. We actually have a course built on it.
Wow.
And it walks you through how to have this because most of us don't know. And my goal, and it's in the works, is to come up with something to help us in real time, whether it's VR or just like coming over your watch to help you be like, pause, pause. So my approach is 4 steps. And it's number one is pause. Just pause. And like truly, if you as a parent do nothing else but just pause, you've won. And the pause took me so long to learn because that amygdala wants to freak out or wants to shut down or wants to, but just pause. Okay. And then once you as a parent are able to get past that, it's really just acknowledging it's acknowledging that it's happening. And at that 2 year old, there's really not much you can say besides something even like you seem frustrated, and keep your energy nice and positive
Yeah.
for them. Luke said it, distraction. I think it was you that said the banana versus
The
the apple.
apple.
I thought that was super cute. Um, and it's not a huge deal, but that's not what your brain is saying. Your amygdala is screaming shame. And so my favorite line to parents were like, they would come into my office, they were like, this happened, what do I do? And I would say, here's the thing, there's only two types of people looking at you. One are people that don't have kids and they don't matter because they have no idea what they're talking about.
Exactly.
Or two, they're the parent that goes, oh my gosh, I'm so glad it's not my day. So that's it. Those are the only two. And like we would just chuckle about it because I think we are so there's nothing that triggers more shame than being a parent because we want to be good at it. So when I'm talking about this stuff online and parents will be like, oh, I think we're not beating them enough, and like, Rem, I want to be like, yeah, that's the answer. But like, I know, again, I do it back to them. I pause, I acknowledge what they're saying. And then step three, because they're older, is then I lean in with questions, any question except for one that starts with a why. Like, how else could that look? What's the outcome you're hoping for? And then that step four is decide. And that could look like anything in that decision. It could be like, we'll agree to disagree, or I can see your perspective. That's not what I've seen in my practice, though. So those are my four steps for communication with whoever you're working with, and they just need to be adjusted kind of as age.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And to be honest, when you were talking about the pause, that's something that I hadn't personally thought of until recently. Now, to put it into context, my kids are 6 and 4 years old. Okay. So I haven't been dad for that long. You could say I'm an inexperienced dad, but I've gotten a lot better. And now I should mention, I've always been more on the calm side. I'm not really one to lose my temper and start yelling or throwing things around or punching the walls or anything like that. That's just not me. But patience, that's one thing that I had to work on as a new father. And I remember, the first few times that my son would misbehave, in my opinion, um, I'd resort to raising my voice.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I think about it, it's ridiculous. I was raising my
Yeah.
voice to a 2-year-old.
Right.
What's that gonna do? I know better now, but I did make mistakes, and I can probably admit that I was working on them, and I am working on them. It's not perfect. Uh, because I do tend to lose my patience sometimes, and that fortunately for me and my kids, it usually comes out in me raising my voice. So that's what usually happens with me. But the pause is huge,
Huge.
and I cannot stress that enough, to just not having to react right away at a
Mm-hmm.
situation, at your kid screaming or yelling or crying. If you feel like you're about to lose it. And I've spoken about this a lot on X through my content, and I've mentioned advice and tips and tricks like, all right, if you notice that your heartbeat is pretty fast, that might be a sign that you need to pause.
Yes.
If you feel like your fists are clenched, maybe it's time to go in the other room if you can, if your children are old enough, and then you make sure they're safe and all that. You don't want to leave the house either, but just go to the other room. If my wife is there at home too, and I've had a long day at work, and I just feel like, you know what, I just don't have it tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say, honey, do you mind taking over? Because I feel like I don't want to do anything I'm gonna regret. And sure enough, we tag team. So on the days that she's not feeling so great, then I'll take over. And I'm blessed to have a wife that can step in for me on the times that I'm just not, I've had a long day at work, and I I hate my job and all that stuff, and stress, and not being happy with my work. So it is something that you can do, is
Mm-hmm.
just leave the room. It doesn't have to be that crazy, I guess. The pause is probably a better way to go about it, I guess, depending on your symptoms. So again, if you feel like I feel like if you're about to lose it, then yeah, get out there, tap
Yeah.
out. But if you're still like, in a controlled state, the pause and breathing. My God,
Hmm.
the breathing has helped.
Yes.
And because you feel it too in the moment, you feel like your blood is boiling. And if you notice, if you're self-aware during
You're
that time,
holding.
you feel like you're holding your breath, right?
You are, yes.
So just exhale. And then just that calms you down, and you're probably in a better state to start dealing with the situation. Now, is that something that uh you talk about a lot? Is that something with the families that you help out with that type of situation? Are breathing techniques a huge part of it?
They are. And I even work with a breathwork facilitator.
Oh,
Her name's Lisa Mort. So I have numerous breathwork facilitators that I get to collaborate with, bring them into schools. And of course, like I do some small breathwork on my own, but um, just I have like that team where they come in and teach in the schools to do it or into families or even do full, like, I'm going to call it a ceremony, but it's like a yoga type of breathing for families. Like it's critical. And I also want to say, Rem, I've been working with families for 20 years and you are a fabulous dad. I can tell you focus on it. Like that's all it takes. Like, and you are doing it. Look at you. You're iterating your career to learn about it. Like that's how in many ways I see myself. Like I'm not here because, hey, Rem, I'm the best communicator. I'm the perfect mom. No, I have like so many issues around it. And so I'm focusing on it and I'm learning it and I'm sharing it while I'm going. And that's what it takes. When I see the parent that's like, that's how my parents did, I'm done, I'm not, like that hurts my heart. And then other people just, it's not where they can put their focus. Like when I was first a single mom, you know, 2020 hindsight, maybe I should have prioritized reading a few books that I didn't, but that's not, like I was in survival mode and that's where I was and I did the best I could when that's what I knew. And so good for you to put your focus there. And that brings me joy because I can't imagine the joy that you show up, you and your wife showing up in that way, tag teaming it brings in your family.
thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And like I said before, it's not perfect.
Yep.
But we do put the focus on it, my wife and I, and it's so awesome to have a partner that's on the same page as you. We share the same ideas and concepts in terms of discipline and how we're going to communicate with our kids on a daily basis. And I don't know what you would call it in terms of parenting styles, but I guess it's probably more on the peaceful parenting spectrum side of it. Uh, what are your thoughts on authoritative parenting? Now,
Hmm.
are we getting a movement away from that? Are we seeing a lot more parents going on the side of peaceful parenting? Is there a mix of it? Is there still a place for authoritative parenting? And when I say authoritative, I mean, it's okay to raise your voice. It's okay to punish and have serious consequences for a kid misbehaving, stealing his sister's toy. You go to your room or timeout. Is there still a place for that, or is that really family dependent and it depends on what the parents prefer?
So I think it's all about what the family wants. So when a family comes to me, they're usually not coming because they're like everything's perfect, Then I'd be like, okay, hi, nice to meet you. Usually they're coming to me with concerns. They're like the kids are stealing, or like some of them have shown up to say, I have a history of drug use. I'm so afraid of my kids with that, or I have although I'm a professional, I'm constantly stressed out and I don't want that for my kids, or I see my kids stressed. And so then we get to sit down and a lot of people haven't done this. I'm like, what do you want? And when, like, at first they're like, I just want my kids to listen. But then when we get deeper, parents sometimes will say things when they're tempted with drugs or drinks. I want them to come to me. And like, I'm like, okay, let's write that down. And we get to define those things and then we can work backwards. And when you tell me you want resilient children, you want close-knit family, you want children who are willing to come to you with hard decisions. Now, if you tell me like you want, and I'm going to call out I love my parents, but I'm going to go ahead and call them out. Like I said, my father owns a bulldozer company, so you may be able to kind of surmise what his personality is a bit. He absolutely believes that his job was to make us tough. And he has 4 daughters. I would say we are tough. Um, it also made us disconnected. Like to this day, he will still call me and I might answer the phone and he'll be like, "Hey, stupid." And I have to like, my husband will be there and my husband's like, "Hit mute, Shannon." And I just breathe and I just breathe. And I'll be like, "Hey, Dad, do you need something?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Why are you calling me a name?" And he's like, "I want to make sure I have your attention." And I'm like, "You had my attention. I answered the phone."
Right.
But it's so he really believes to this day that his job was to call me every name, to put me down so that I would be tough in the world. And again, that may have been the correct world. And you never know where our world's heading. Maybe that is the world. That's not what I want. I do want my children resilient and I do want them persistent. And I do want them to be able to stand up for what they believe in. I don't think that authoritative, if we're using it in a term of that, is not what I want. I want clear expectations that I do expect to be held. And I want my children to do them because of the respect for the connection, that tribe. And I want us to continue to be a close-knit family for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, that's really it's not surprising to me that because I feel like the old generation it was probably a common thing
Yes,
to speak to their children that way, to act in a certain manner, maybe even spanking was part of it.
yes,
Um, obviously punishments and that sort of thing. But I feel like there's a better way to do things now.
agreed.
And it's
And we
it's
have the
it, I wouldn't
signs.
want to say
Yeah.
that one is better than the other. It's just I always ask people, well, what's more pleasant for you? To be yelling and punishing your kids, or to have try to have a conversation? Though, granted, it depends on their age, but let's say we're talking to a 6-year-old, 8-year-old, which I feel is an age that you can already start to reason with them.
Yeah.
Now, isn't it more pleasant to try to reason with your child as opposed to yelling at them or even hitting them? I can't, I don't see how that's better. And again, I don't want to place the blame on those kinds of parents because again, everybody has their style. But the ones that justify it by saying, well, that's how I was brought up. I was spanked as a child and look, I turned out fine. That's the line that you hear a lot. I turned out fine. Well, did you? That's debatable. So I feel like we're using the previous generation to justify something that we're doing now. But I mean, have we not evolved as people?
You absolutely nailed it. And I love what I get to do because I'm grateful I was raised in that way. My father gave us $100 every year we didn't miss a day. And Rem, when I say didn't miss a day, you did not show up for school 2 minutes late. I got my tonsils out and still showed up at school. I did not miss a
Wow.
day from second grade to my senior year, not an hour of school. Okay, like 100%, it had to fit in this box and push forward, but don't listen to yourself. And I think that's what's missing. And that is that trauma that most people don't realize. We don't know how to hear ourselves. I know after I got a divorce, I sat back and went, oh crap, I don't trust myself and I don't even know how to trust myself. School continually told me, keep going forward. Okay, now take this test. Now take the MCAT. Now go to school. Now finish residency. And then all of a sudden I was like, who's going to tell me where to go? I'm super tough and I can ram that way, but I have no idea who I am or how to hear me. And so I love being able, like, my job isn't just working with parents. Now I get to do something really cool. Companies bring me in and I work usually with their leadership team and make sure they're communicating and then communicate through the company. And what's super cool is I get to work with awesome people. Gosh, I love a lot. I mainly work with men, surprisingly. Like I expected to mainly
Okay.
work with women, but I don't. And so I'll work with guys like, for example, a gas and oil company. And these guys, we go back and forth whose dad was tougher and we have a good time with it. And then I end up being like, dude, I did that. Totally did that. I screamed, and then I'm able to walk them through the science of where the brain lights up. And truly, when they get, they're like, oh, snap. So I can just say that. And I'm like, yeah, but like for me, I know I didn't have the tools. And I almost a part of me didn't believe I could get them. And so let me bring up the pause again. Do you care if I tell you a quick story about the pause?
Please.
So I was a screamer, just gonna flat out call myself out. My parents were screamers, and I mean screaming to like, I can't, oh. So once I found out as a pediatrician that children's brains of parents that scream look very similar on an MRI to children that are physically abused. So we're really quick to be like, oh, don't slap your kid in the face, don't beat them, don't. But we don't realize that mental abuse is very similar as far as it shows up as scarring in the brain.
Really?
Okay. So here I am, I'm a pediatrician, I know this, and I can't stop. Something happens, I step on that Lego, I wig out, my daughter doesn't do it immediately. And of course, it's what I saw. So my second husband, oh, love him because I didn't even want to show people this. I was so ashamed of it. I didn't start seeing a therapist until I got my divorce. That was massively transformative. After that, I would say therapy can be beneficial to everyone. You know, I'm not saying everyone has to go, but it can be beneficial to everyone.
Okay.
So here I am. I'm a screamer. I'm feel so ashamed about it. And we know that shame actually reduces the probability of changing. So when we talked about blame and shame, you know,
Yeah.
people will be like, they should be ashamed of themselves. I'm like, you just said they shouldn't change. Like it's this messed up concept in there. So I felt so ashamed that I couldn't change because I had the expectation that I know it, I should change. So when I got with my husband, he quickly saw that this is what I was doing. And he could have been like, hey, you crazy, you know what I mean? And that wouldn't have helped. Instead, we were able to communicate. And I was like, this is what I'm doing. And I don't know how to stop. And here's how I stopped. And I share this on stage all the time is I started in 1%. The first time, like after we discussed it, talked about what I was going to do, I paused for a millisecond and I exploded. And my husband was like, hey, Shannon, can I talk to you in the other room? And we came in, he goes, I saw you pause for a millisecond. Great job. And like, that got me to the next second and the next. And like by 3 and 4 seconds before I exploded, we told the kids, and then the kids started cheering me on, for mom made it 3 seconds without wigging out. Okay.
Nice.
And then once you hit 10 seconds, usually you're able to bring your brain online. And so it has been quite a while, like, not that I've not raised my voice and always working on that, but to really lose it. And that was so my norm, and understanding the trauma. And so, it's almost like if somebody was a recovering alcoholic, I feel like I'm a recovering screamer.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. It's really inspiring because I feel like now everybody, I, I I feel like everybody can change, and
Yeah.
why not? And I think it comes down to being able to regulate your own emotions. Now,
Yes.
that's to me, that's probably the biggest issue. And sometimes I think to myself, well, obviously the kids like that. Look at the parents. They can
Correct.
barely control their own emotions. How do you expect your kid to stay calm and not misbehave? And how do you expect your kid to react positively to a situation when you do the exact same thing, but the adult version? You
You
get
got it.
angry on because you've been on the phone for 35 minutes with customer service for your cell phone company. And
No
you start
doubt.
cussing and cursing on the phone and raising your voice and losing your patience with the customer service agent. Our kids see that and they're gonna probably copy it, and because they think that's the normal behavior.
You
So
got
if
it.
we're not doing that ourselves as parents, controlling our emotions, staying calm as much as possible, then we cannot expect our kids to be calm if we're not doing it ourselves. Now,
Absolutely.
if let's say in a situation where parents have the tendency to lose their patience and not react well in those kinds of situations, and they might throw a pen or something in anger and frustration. If that's something that they don't necessarily change, is there a chance that the kids themselves can grow up and not be like their parents? Or is it like, oh, good luck, kid. I seen what your parents are like. It's gonna be tough for you.
Hmm. So I definitely think everyone can change. And I like to see it as I used to think we learn linearly, but we learn exponentially. And so I do think this kids see it, and you think that's normal, and you're trying to release that. And so when you were talking about parenting like the last generation to get this generation, that is the results you get. You get the not knowing how most of the guys I work with will say, I'll say, how are you feeling? What's your emotion? And they're like, I'm good. I'm like, that's not an emotion. And I tell them, I'm like, me too. I actually have this emotion wheel that even in like the pharmaceutical companies I work with, I'm like, we put it up. I'm like, okay, which emotion? Because we don't know. So it's really the vast majority of us don't know how to regulate those emotions. And so our kids are copying. Fortunately, I think that's where we need to come at it from every angle, from bringing this emotional intelligence into the school, from bringing these communication tools to showing it at work. Like I love being able to work with companies because like they start to see the benefit really quickly. They're like, oh, our team can communicate better. Wait, oh, we're not having duplicate, we're not having as many mistakes. And I'm sitting there going, haha, I'm reaching all your children, and like I just absolutely love that, but it's all the way down. And we get to come at it from different angles in this way.
Okay. And so obviously, the families that are coming to you with these issues, they're obviously there because they want to work on themselves, right?
Yes.
But do you see beyond the fact that they're aware that they need to do better, is there an openness to change, or do you have to like fight them on that and like convince them that there's something to be done here? Because in my experience, the minute that even constructively criticize somebody's parenting techniques, they get defensive.
Absolutely. So I, for the most part, don't say very much at all. Like so outside of I can see parents all day long do ridiculous things at the grocery store, or even friends, and I don't say a word. But when you come to work with me, we actually set up rules. We talk about, luckily, most of them, like through the process, they're open to it because they hear what a hot mess I was. And knowing what a hot mess I was helps them. And I don't tell them usually directly. It's questions. It's a lot of questions to be like, well, how'd that work out? Like I'll even say, go ahead and try it. Because my system, I'll tell you, is truly applying the scientific method to everything. So in other words, if they're like, we can't get our kid to straighten up their room, I'm like, okay, that's your current situation. Tell me about that. Okay, what's your desired? And then they'll tell me. And then I'm like, define the problem, hypothesize, test. And they might be like, I'm taking everything out of their room, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, check that out. Let's try it. Let's do that. Okay, we're gonna meet back next week and you're gonna tell me how that one went. And like we set up parameters and measure and like my goal is not to be right. I like to say I can solve any problem, not because I have the answer, but because I'm going to walk you through it until we find it with focus and persistence. And so it's never about what you're doing. It's what's the result and is it what you want? And so when they're talking about the kids behavior, I really dive in to get real clear on current, really clear on desired, and usually it's not about the bedroom, it's about something else, and we just keep diving and they end up being like, well, that didn't work. And so it's not me saying, look what you did, because I don't have the answer. I truly believe most of us have the answer in us.
Right.
Like, I'm like, how do you think the kid felt when you said that? And he's like, shitty. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that. So, and then we work through there. People want to be connected. That trauma really holds us back. I think that so many of us, like I'll tell you this, 20 years, I have never met a parent that didn't want to be a good parent. And so when I
Okay.
hear people be like, oh my God, they're just a bad parent, I'm like, oh my gosh, stop doing that to people. Even the people that I knew were addicted, were they didn't want to be a crappy parent. They were probably numbing the pain from their childhood. And that's why removing that judgment and leaning in with love and curiosity, I think can start to help us all heal and move towards more connection.
Okay. Shannon, I have a very important question for you.
Bring it.
Uh, Once it's been established that maybe a child does have issues with stress and anxiety, no matter the cause, uh, in your opinion, and look, I have already my opinion on it, and I feel like what you're doing has to be the first step with the help that you're providing with parents and children and families in general. I feel like that would be probably the first place to start. But do you get the sense that we're sending our kids to a therapist way too quick? Like,
Hmm.
is that like the first resort when it should be maybe the last resort? Should we look at the family situation first? Should we get them to have seek services like you provide for families? Because you hear about it a lot, and I don't know if you're familiar with Abigail Schreier. She's been
I'm
on a
not.
few podcasts lately on Joe Rogan and Modern Wisdom, and she's a big advocate of. She thinks that we children are in therapy way too much,
Interesting.
and she advocates for just like what we're talking about now, and as opposed to sending our kids to the therapist and having them just give them medication. So in your opinion, do we have that way too much today where kids are going to therapy and getting medication for maybe something that can be dealt with by seeking services like such as yours?
Okay, so I'm going to separate that into therapy and medication. Um, Up until recently in our area, and I'll say the past 10 years, it was hard to find therapy for these kids. So that's not what I was experiencing as far as getting them into quick. I was happy to get them anywhere. Like now, luckily, we have like play therapy. I'm like, bring it on, because really then we can talk to the parents, and give them the tools. Like in my dream world, we could have super nannies showing up in everybody's house, but these are very rare services. So medication, like I want to change the food before I throw a medication at us. I
Yes.
want to get sleep. Um, I want a parent to, and this is, acknowledge what a child is feeling. So I told you my 4-step process is pause, acknowledge. Rem, acknowledge was so hard for me because I don't feel I was acknowledged at all. Even now, again, love my mom. My mom has her PhD in mathematics, but acknowledging my feelings or someone else's was not in that realm of possibilities. So even now, it was so hard for me. I had to and have like paper with statements on them of how to acknowledge. So in other words, say my kid's like, oh my gosh, my teacher is the worst. Step one, pause. Well, let me tell you what I would have said before.
Okay.
What'd you do? Or I would say, well, too bad that's your teacher. Okay. All ridiculous. The steps, pause. Shannon, stop talking. Okay. Then two, acknowledge them. And that can literally look like you seem frustrated. You seem angry. We can actually, when you say a statement like that, it changes where their brain is lighting up. And so their brain is lit up in the amygdala. They're mad at that teacher. And I'm going to look at them and tell them what to do. It's, once you understand the psychology and the neuroscience behind it, it's like, well, why didn't I just punch him in the face while I was at it? So it's acknowledging. So like to me, that would fix so many things, just teaching a parent to pause. And that's why like I almost want that app to pop up and be like, pause, say, that must have been hard. That must have been hard, like to help, because most of us weren't acknowledged, but just doing that actually calms the child's brain in order to feel heard. So I think because so many kids are in bad situations, for the most part, therapy, not the medication piece. I want
Right.
that to be much further down. But if you can get an awesome therapist, which I have a team of them that I refer people to. For example, I have a group of therapists that are on call for my teenagers. So my teenagers can literally be like, I'm having a bad day. I'm so mad. And before they were stuck only being able to call their friends who were then going to gossip about it and give bad advice. Whereas the therapists that I collaborate with literally get to be like, pause, acknowledge. Hey, what else could that look like? How else could they do? And they really take this approach of helping that person reflect and hear themselves. So yes, for the medication, if the therapy's done right, it's a team of people that are there for the child to make them feel important and learn to hear themselves.
Okay, so as long as, we're not throwing medication at them right away, and we're trying to get to the root cause of what's going
Yes.
on and trying to help them first, and, looking at their sleep and their nutrition and their environment and who they're around. I feel like those are the first things, and you mentioned it. I feel like those are the first things that we should be looking at and asking the parents or the kids if they're old enough, right?
Yep. It's a true strategy. That's why I like call myself a strategist. Because when a family calls me, it's not like not like I have all the answers. Like I help get them I might be like, there's a chef in our town that makes these really locally made, really good foods. He drops them off once a week and they end up being cheaper than the grocery store when they're done, you know? Or I'll be like, okay, let me connect you with this woman who comes into your home and does yoga. Or hey, there's free yoga in the park. So it's really strategizing to get the whole family. Or recently we had a teen with body issues. We got her a woman who comes in and talks to her about her body image and helps her pick out clothes, and at the same time, like, not judging the parents, but being there to support and saying, you know, hey, what do you want that's not happening so we can get it. And again, that's where I'm kind of grateful that I was such a hot mess, because therefore people aren't usually afraid to look at me to be like, oh my God, Shannon, you're not going to believe what I did. I'm like, bring it on, sister. I'm right there with you. So
That's awesome. Now, Shannon, this is the part of the show where I want you to tell me more about Own Your Focus,
okay.
because it sounds great to me, but tell me more specifically, in what types of situations can parents specifically come to you? What kind of issues would they be a viable candidate for your services?
Okay, so a couple different areas. Okay, so one is I have a program called Up Level Parenting. It is for a parent that's like, I don't know what I want, or I know my purpose, but I don't know how to get there. It is a monthly, usually it's like 6 months to a year. It is both group coaching, it's videos where we really help you break down what you want and exactly how to get there. So it could be a parent who is like, I'll say one woman is a respiratory therapist, and her passion is to help first responders that are struggling while she's trying to balance this home and create all this. It really helps them break down the overwhelm and focus in order to achieve those things in small, attainable goals to create that full blown connection. Like, own your focus for me is not just me. My children come to my talks. They help me set up. They do different pieces. And so most of the people that work with me in there, they might not want to change the world, but they might want that just deeper connection to find the purpose for their family. And so that's one, that's up level parenting. And like I said, that's videos, coaching, and we really work them through. Okay. And then we have another program that is specifically for parents or anyone that works with kids 2 to 7, completely changing the way they communicate in order to light their brains up in the neocortex to help them learn to think and be in touch with their own thoughts and their own emotions. And we're implementing it both with the Healthy Grand families throughout the state of West Virginia. We're working in Ohio and Kentucky on different programs there as well. But people can reach out and say, hey, I want to take that 12-week parenting 2 to 7, and great, we'll get you hooked up. And then I have private clients where I'll have families reach out that are like, we want to work with you directly. What's that look like? And usually that is a weekly meeting once a week where there are assignments, we break stuff down, and we truly strategize. And so they might end up working with me for a little while, and then I put their pieces in place and we're good. And to see their family thrive is truly, I believe we are all in this together. And the more of us that are doing this, the better for our whole world.
Shannon, thank you so much for joining me on Dads with Mics. I really appreciate it. This was very insightful stuff. Let us know, where can people reach you?
Ownyourfocus.com. And then on Facebook, I have my page, Own Your Focus. And then we also have a group called Badass Boss Moms. And it's not just for moms, it's truly anyone that wants to birth change in the world. And I really, like I said, believe we are all in this together. And I'd love to hear from anyone with questions, and I'm always trying to fail forward. So if there's anything I said in here and somebody wants to fact check me, bring it on. I love to learn. And I just appreciate you. I appreciate this platform. And I love the conversations with dads because they are critical, and making sure that we help bring our men up. I think right now in society, sometimes we tend to put men down, and that hurts my heart. I'm not there. I'm raising a young man, and we are all in this together. So thank you, Rem. I appreciate you.